the people who are the solar panel people are like, yeah, we feel terrible about it, but we got to make the panels. Don't be misled with regard to this idea of tightening belts and austerity. There is always money to be for spending or for funding social services. It's there. And if it's not, it can be created. It exists. And if it's not, it can be put into the, with computer keystrokes, into the reserve accounts at the Federal Reserve of the different agencies that might need it, or the different banks that fund the different agencies, blah, blah, blah. The issue isn't money per se, it's who controls it and who creates it. It's amazing. It's amazing that these very few institutions and these very few individuals have been granted this extraordinary power to create money out of thin air based upon my promise to repay loans, based upon the extension of credit, and that the federal government falls into that very same category. They borrow too. And then everybody says, well, we have to raise taxes to pay back the debts of the federal government. No. It's not true. All that would need to happen is that the federal government be in charge of creating the money. Take the power away from the banks. The private institutions that have benefited for so long now, and the people who have run these institutions who have become so perversely wealthy, in comparison to 150 million, in comparison to 45 million Americans on food stamp subsidies, in comparison to 45 million children. Was it 1 in 6 children in the United States living in poverty? Take the power to create money away from these private institutions, put it in the hands of government, put lots of checks and balances and lots of oversight so that the corruption can be monitored. And all these social services become fully funded by definition. By definition, everybody gets health care. Yes, will people's standards of living decline? Yeah. Well, you won't be able to have 7 houses. Sorry. You won't be able to have a house in the Bahamas and a house... No, sorry. Like my sister's next door neighbors who buy up houses. No, you won't be able to do that. Sorry. There will be a closer gap between those who are living on the margins and those who are the super wealthy. The gap will close. And you know what? That's a good thing. For those of you who don't think that's a good thing and who think I'm preaching socialism, just wait. Wait until these austerity-minded morons in Congress, these austerity-minded right-wing zealots who are nuts, gain enough of a majority to actually enact the kinds of things, like, how's about the state of Alabama with its new immigration law? Right? We're going to put in jail people who are illegal immigrants. We're doing this because we need to save the economy of Alabama. That's the most important thing. It's the illegal immigrants who are taking up the jobs of the people who live in Alabama legally. Wait until you create a situation in which food stamp subsidies are a burden on the federal government and we are no longer going to issue them. 45 million hungry people who are pissed off? Yeah, that's wise. That's a good idea. We're going to cut unemployment subsidies because we can't afford to pay for those subsidies. Oh, that's good. 22 million Americans who can't find work, and you're going to cut off those only paychecks, the only link that they have to being able to feed their families and put gas in their cars? That's a good idea. I like that idea. It's really smart. You want to see the breakdown of the fabric of American society? Do that. Right? Don't have to. Federal government can always fund Social Security. The federal government can always fund food stamps. The federal government can always help fund unemployment insurance for the states. The federal government could, with 2 keystrokes, give the state of Vermont $5 billion. Just add them to the reserve accounts at the Treasury and transfer them to the Treasury up there in Montpelier in order to pay for the rebuilding of Vermont after Tropical Storm Irene. The creation of money is not the issue, it's who controls it. It's the most extraordinary ruse that's been played on the American people to think that these monies somehow don't exist. It's like a scoreboard at a football game. You punch a couple of numbers and you hit enter, the money exists. Somehow, we have come to believe that this money has to be created privately, and that when it is, it must be repaid. If the government borrows it, it must be repaid through increased taxation and through cuts in social services. And that's simply untrue. All that has to happen is the money that's being created needs to be created for the public good. And when the banks say to you, we are extending credit and we are looking to loan money at lower rates and we're doing this because we believe in America. If you believe that, then you have lost your way. Because to think that the banks are creating money, Bank of America and Citi and Goldman's and smaller banks are lending money as a public good in 99+% of the cases, you have lost your way. To think that during the housing boom, that mortgage underwriters who were getting their little fee for underwriting mortgages, their little commission fee, and they knew they could sell off bad mortgages off, package them as securities and sell them off to other people. To think that they were putting people in houses. We're putting, Countrywide. Countrywide is on, that's Nationwide, wrong song. To think that Countrywide was, that they could come up, they could say, oh, we're doing this for the public good. We're getting people into houses. They knew that the mortgages were a sham. They knew that in a couple of years when when these mortgages, these variable rate mortgages and these, teaser rates, when they kicked in, that people wouldn't be able to pay for the mortgages. They knew that these houses were going to go into foreclosure. They knew that the multi-trillion-dollar mortgage industry and housing industry was a total sham. What the heck did they care? It wasn't for the public good. They made their commission checks. Right? They're fine. They didn't care. It's a really important issue to understand, yet understanding modern money. You may disagree with my assessment that money should be created and controlled by the federal government. You may see the federal government as being too big, and you might say, no, that's communism and that's socialism. And I'm saying put aside those kind of old ideological arguments, put aside those, those vestiges of the Cold War days and all that, put aside that ideology, and just think about it in terms of, from a logical standpoint. Logically speaking, can we continue to have haves who get richer and richer and a larger group of have-nots who get poorer and poorer in real terms? Can we afford that? Can we afford to have, in a country of 310, 320 million people, 50 million who live below the poverty line? Can we afford to have people who can't find jobs? Are we going to be able to continue to sustain a country in which you have a very, very small, an increasingly small percentage of people who control an increasingly large percentage of the money that's being created by private institutions and captured by the people who are associated with those private institutions? Can we continue to accept the fact that it's okay for someone to be a billionaire while the guy down the street is looking for half-eaten hot dogs out of the goddamn garbage pail? I don't think so. I know, I'm a self-righteous jackass. I understand. Listening to me blabber on like this, if you've done it, you're probably thinking to yourself, oh my God, what a jerk. Perhaps that's so. But my point is, you need to understand modern money. You need to understand that modern money is not constrained, the creation of it is not constrained by being tied to a commodity like gold, that we don't need to go into this hyper austerity mode and cut government spending in order to somehow tighten our belts and not default on our debts. We'll never default on our debts. It's impossible. It's impossible for the United States to default. Impossible. Because the Federal Reserve can always find ways to monetize debt and to just credit accounts at the Chinese and Japanese accounts, just credit their accounts at the Federal Reserve. You need to understand that the problem is not debt per se, it's how debt is created, how money is created, who ends up having the burden for that debt, and how we could change that system by reclaiming the ability to create money and as a lubricant for the public good, not as a means by which a few people can become the Zuckerbergs of the world. Call me a Marxist, call me a Marxist. In any event, the Angry Moderate has gone off on his self-righteous soapbox here for about an hour, and now I have to run off to the town of Enfield for a play rehearsal so that I can fan my ever-growing ego even more. But, so it goes. That's it for the Angry Moderate for this episode, and maybe if you're lucky, you'll be able to see me blither on about this Mishigas again. Adios.